So we're gonna make a. I already got one named debian.
So you click the new button on the top left.
Yep.
That's for new virtual machines, and then it just asks for your the name, type, and then version. So when we set type to Linux, it's going to ask us for our version of Linux, which is our distribution. And there's lots of. Go ahead.
And when you type in the name, if you notice when I typed in Debian, it automatically assigned it to Debian. You're probably going to be running the 64-bit version, so make sure you change it.
You might not be, though.
Little nuance thing, some laptops don't come with Intel VT virtualization technology enabled, and that'll force you to run on 32-bit.
So you won't be able to run 64-bit on your 64-bit VMs on your 64-bit host.
So I should download the 32-bit and take that?
You'll still be able to run 64-bit VirtualBox, but only 32-bit, yes.
That's something you can go in and change in the BIOS.
But for right now, that's probably what you want to do. So what I was going to say is show, you can look under your different types to see what's supported. That doesn't mean that's all that's supported. You can still pick things. It's generally better to pick something closer. Like if you go to install Kali, Kali is based on Debian, so you can make it a Debian virtual machine and put Kali on.
You can just do other if you don't really.
If you really don't know, do other. But otherwise, you can if you know something about it. The version of Linux, we talk about distros, distributions. It's all like flavors of the same basic idea. Everything's on the Linux kernel, which is the base operating system, and it's modifications of that. So different people like different flavors of it.
So we're going to hit next. And the next part is you assign how much memory. So I'm going to assign this 4 gigabytes, which is 4096 megabytes.
It's not going to let you assign more than your operating system has. You shouldn't do that anyway.
You should
don't assign more than half right now.
You should leave at least 2 gigabytes for Windows, at the very least.
It's pretty generous, 4 gigs.
It depends on your operating system. If you're on Windows, you want to leave 2, and then that's if you're on Windows 7. Windows XP, you can leave like 1, and then if you were on Linux, you could leave more like 500 megs.
Does it only use that much RAM when the virtual machine is
That's the maximum it can use.
Okay.
So out of the amount of RAM in your PC, it will never exceed that. That's how much it thinks it has. So it will never go over.
Okay.
So the danger of giving it all of your host RAM is the guest operating system will keep growing.
This next part is creating the hard disk. So whatever your hard drive you want, you can tell it don't add one. That's the only time you'd ever use that is if you want a live CD. We'll get into that later. Or we can use one that we already know exists. But right now we're going to create a new one. This says the recommended size of the hard drive is 8 gigs.
Just keep it as a VDI.
Yeah, so right now, and almost every time you can use this, you'll keep it as VDI. VMDK is one VMware uses, and some of the other ones are...
All of these are just different versions. They're different file formats that have been used.
I think they use PHP.
So,
That's what
dynamically allocated, VMware calls it thin provision. Basically what it is it'll only use the amount of hard drive that the virtual machine is actually using. So if I assign it a terabyte of hard drive and I'm only using 8 gigs, that VDI file is only going to be 8 gigs. If I use fixed size, it'll use the whole terabyte.
The reason that takes longer, it says it makes take longer to create, it's faster to use. You allocate, when you make that fixed size, it allocates all of the space for the hard drive, makes that file right away, and then it can use it. When it's dynamically allocated, as the guest operating system asks for more memory, it has to create more file for that memory to be available.
So the next part is you actually tell it how much you want that maximum size to be, because I did dynamic. So I'm going to give it 50 gigs because I know it's never going to use anything near that.
Because his is dynamic though, it won't show up as 50 gigs right away. If you do fixed, it'll show up as 50 gigs and take that much space from your hard drive. So just know that.
So when we format it,
before you go and give it your whole hard drive worth of space.
Next thing you want to do is select it and click settings. If you don't do this little step, it'll still work, but it may be painfully slow. Is you want to go over into system and processor. VirtualBox will automatically give your machine one CPU, and it will go very slow because it's actually a virtual CPU. It's still going through Windows. So usually you want to give it something a little more than that. I usually go with half whatever my system has. So I'm going with 8 for this, or sorry, 4 for this one because mine is a quad core with hyper-threading.
Then you can see there's a little more to an execution cap that prevents it from running at actual maximum on those cores. You can force it to not run that high. Maybe if you wanted your system to not be as exerted, I guess, or you're running more than one VM at once.
The other thing is it can be useful if you're using some very heavily hyper-threaded or very heavily threaded programs. So if I'm using a program on this that takes up as many threads as your computer has and use them all efficiently, I may want to give this 8 CPUs and cap it out at 70%. So I leave that 30% for my Windows install for the host, and then we can use the rest of it to use for that guest. Right now I'm going to leave it at 100. So this VirtualBox VM is going to be able to use 100% of it for my cores. As soon as we're done with that, we can actually just go ahead and click start.
So you need a right-click start, or you click that, and then click the start up here.
So we can do that. And the very first thing in VirtualBox, it'll tell you, what am I starting off of? Because it sees that this is the very first time I'm starting up this one, and I'm going to
So
click this.
it's looking for a disk image of basically an installation disk. So these ISO files are just files that describe what a disk looks like. You know, it's a disk image by definition. So he's putting in this Debian 7.6 64-bit net install disk image. So just like he had a physical disk plugged into his computer, except it's virtually on the virtual machine. So it's pretending to be a real disk.
So we're going to go ahead and click start.
And then it'll automatically boot up.
This one. So different install methods. Right now your mouse is not going to work. We can do install or graphical install. There isn't too much of a difference.
So you're going to use arrow keys and enter.
Yeah, so I'm just pressing the arrow keys up, down, and then we're going to do graphical install for now, because it's a little easier to see.
They're literally the same thing with the GUI difference.
The biggest difference is a graphical install, you're able to use your mouse. So we're going to tell it English.
That is one thing, by the way. We're pretty much done with all VM stuff now.
Now this is just a regular Linux install. So
This
tell
is just
it United
this is kind of
States.
starting in the next week. We're doing Linux Monday and Friday, so
Very-
it's standard.
Very careful with this. You will be insanely disoriented if you screw this one up. We're using the American English keyboard, which is usually the ones that start with Q, W, E, R, T, Y.
The reason you don't have to connect to the Norwich network through your VM is your machine, your laptop's already connected to the Norwich network, and it's sharing its internet connection with the virtual machine. So it makes it really easy. The host name, you can pretty much keep standard. Leave it as Debian, name it whatever you want.
Original.
Oh, wow.
Thanks. Domain name. This is right now, this doesn't pertain to us. But as it says, you know, you should pretty much, if you end up using one, use it all on the same. This won't pertain to us here, it pertains to you in the future. We'll leave it alone for now. Leave it blank. Or you could.
Wow.
You have
I think you're
problems.
That's bad
we'll
even
go over
for
that in a
you.
little bit. So one of the things that happens with
And then we set a root password.
real
That's
quick
bad process.
VM
It's
thing
bad practice.
is if
Thanks.
you're not clicked onto this box, when you're clicked into the box, it'll capture your keyboard and mouse and
Oh, is
apply
it
it to
not
the
doing
VM
that?
for someone. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're not clicked into it, then you have to actually click into it. If you want to escape from that, you press right control. So that
That's
little
just how
button right there,
VMware's set up. You can change that setting.
that's
Or
how
VirtualBox.
VMware's Control Alt.
Yeah, Control. So this is a Linux thing. There's a root account, and your root account can do anything. which includes delete your whole file system. So it's really dangerous to be in root. So we're going to make a root account password, and then we're going to make a user account. So the first thing you do is set your root account password. As it, easily describes, you should make this strong. So I set the password. Full name for the new user, which is standard. Type your name. This is kind of one of those things where if it's in a VM and you're kind of just playing around, you don't have to do this.
This is the same thing as you would in Windows.
We set the full name of the user, and then there's a username for every user too. This can be whatever you want. It doesn't have to be your first initial last name. This is just our standard. I'm sure it's fine for you.
Yep.
This password should be different than your root password. If you're just messing around, you could probably leave it the same. I'm going to make this one password too, but it's better in real life when you're installing for a server or you're installing for your laptop. You want this password to be different.
So
it's more waiting.
next week we're going to be talking about the actual Linux stuff in this. We're glazing over a lot of it. Yeah, you're in Eastern time, so but we're glazing over a lot of details here. So we're going to talk about a lot of those details Monday.
So right now we're going to do something called disk partitioning. Right now this is easy because we gave it a blank hard disk, so it's not really a problem. Just do guided, use entire disk. We select the disk we gave it, click continue, and then it will then leave all files in one partition. There's no need to mess with that right now.
Yeah, the only time you'd start messing with stuff like that is if you give it multiple disks.
Once it gets, this is more server related where you're doing a little more work. All files in one partition, recommended for new users. We are new users. And then it's doing all the work in the background. We double check it, good practices. You double check and make sure your disk is actually the one you were installing to. Once you get the physical servers and you might be installing operating system to one disk and using the other one for data, you want to make sure you don't install to the wrong one.
This thing is kind of important. This swap, remember how we were talking about page file earlier? Linux calls it swap. So Windows will call it page file and Linux will call it swap. It's not the biggest deal.
What we just did is we did two partitions, and partitions are just sections of the hard drive. So we just made sections of the hard drive.
Think about it as you're taking a little slice out of the pizza.
The package manager, we just want to pick a server that's near us because the package manager is where we install most of our programs from. So pick United States because we're not in Uzbekistan.
So what a package manager is, think of what the App Store for Apple is.
So pick fdp.us.debian, it came up top. So maybe we could pick something closer, pick the MIT one, I guess. Just continue through this, blank.
Yeah, don't need to know about this.
And you can see it's configuring aptitude. The shorthand for aptitude is apt.
And for the most part, the commands you're going to be running that involve this is going to be apt-get. That's just what the shorthand command is for.
And then sometimes you need to run dpackage if something's really messed up.